different expenses which are involved in developing the product right from concept to reality. Now the products can be boilers, the products can be conveyors, the products can be heat exchangers. So the products can be any manufacturing that is related to any manufacturing. So zero-based budgeting, it is like a method of budgeting in which all the expenses of the products which is mentioned on the screen are justified for every cycle of the component. Like say for example, whenever I am developing the product right from concept, so there are a lot of expenses which are involved in developing the product from the concept. Like first of all, if I want to design the boiler, if I want to manufacture the boiler, so first of all I need to purchase the raw material. Then there is the expenses which are involved in handling the raw material. Then I have to machine certain components. Then there is some process that is involved in machining those components. Then there is a tool cost, then there is a labor cost, and then there is a dispatch cost. So these are the certain expenses that I have shortlisted on the screen. But when you will be working in actual companies, there are a lot of expenses. So whenever these expenses are involved in the company, it increases the cost of the product. So it is mandatory for every zero-based engineer, or it is mandatory for every ZBB engineer to cut down the cost of the product. Now, when I'm saying that you have to cut down the cost of the product, it doesn't mean that you have to do cost accounting. So whenever you want to cut down the product, you have to play with the process, you have to play with the material, and then you have to play with the expenses. So whenever you are cutting down the cost, you have to take mechanical engineering into consideration. So whenever I am doing zero-based costing, whenever I am implementing zero-based costing in any companies, it is mandatory that you have to calculate the cost of the component. You have to calculate the cost of the product every time and for every new cycles. So what happens is that whenever you are doing the costing of the component, every time you take or you consider the different trends of machining during the process. So what happens is that your cost is foolproof. So the process of zero-based budgeting starts from zero base. So whenever I will be doing the costing of the component, whenever I will be doing the budgeting of the product, I will be starting the calculations of the product right from its baseline. That is right from its zero base. That is a reason it is termed as zero base. So whenever I am doing zero base costing, I have to consider the function and the need of the component. I have to consider the function and the need of the product. Means what? Say for example, if I am doing the costing of a shaft, I need to understand what is the functioning of the shaft. Like whether is there any heat treatment process carried out on the shaft, how many RPMs that are coming on the shaft, what is the equal mass distribution load on the shaft. So wherever the bearings are going to get mount on the shaft, so whether I should go with the grinder or whether I should just machine it with the help of lathe machines or not. So whenever I am doing the costing of the product, first of all I need to understand what is the functioning of that component, what is the functioning of the product. Only understanding functioning will not give you the accurate cost of the product. For that matter, you have to consider what is the need. So when function and need is understood by the zero-based budgeting engineer, then you have the accurate cost with you. Say for example, if you want to machine the component, then you have to understand which tool material should be used. So whenever I'm calculating the cost of the component, whenever I'm calculating the cost of the product, every expenses should be considered. You cannot overlook any expenses in the product design. Secondly, whenever you are doing costing, you have to consider how many manufacturing approaches are going to carried out on the component, because that decides the machining time, that is decide the aspect of machining that is involved in the product. Like say for example, if I am going to machine a component, So first of all, I need to understand which are the manufacturing processes, like whether I should, whether there is a rough milling, whether there is a counter milling, whether there is a finish milling, whether there is a drilling operation. So first of all, I need to understand how many processes are going to get involved in the product. Based on the processes, then I can able to understand how many expenses are involved in the manufacturing. So to achieve the accuracy of the component cost, to achieve the accuracy of the product cost, it is very important for a mechanical engineer to understand which operations are going to take place on the component. Most of the time, unnecessary operations are getting carried out on the component, and that shoots the price of the product. So it is very important that if you want the accuracy of the component, you should know which are the operations that are going to take part on the component. Budgets which are built around the product in order to its need, or in order to its function, they are especially defined by the management. So now the time has come for all the manufacturing companies in India that they have to redesign their manufacturing operations using clean process sheet. So whenever I am saying redesign, it doesn't mean that you will enter into a CAD model and then you will make the changes in the CAD. Whenever I am saying that you have to redesign your manufacturing operation, it means that you have to optimize the process planning of every component. So whenever you want to optimize the process planning of the component, it means that you have to go through the every hierarchy of the operations of the component. So if you can able to navigate with the hierarchy of the operations, you can able to optimize the process of the component. Once you optimize the process of the components, it will reduce the cycle time, it will reduce the machining time, and ultimately it will reduce the cost of the component. So it is very important that for every manufacturing company, you should have a clean process sheet approach. Now, due to COVID-19, it has not only affected the economic of the organization, but it has also affected the selling or the catalog price of the product. Now, say for example, if we have two manufacturers, say for example, there is a manufacturer A who has a conveyor product. There is a manufacturer B who has the same conveyor product. So most of the time you will see that both products have the same specification, but there is a difference in the cost. Now, if you want to sell the product into the market, it is important for a mechanical engineer to enhance the competitiveness of the product. Okay, designing, analysis, they are the integral part of the product. But if you cannot able to sell the product into the market, then there is no use of designing the product. There is no use of doing FE analysis on the product unless and until the product is not sold into the market, unless and until you don't get a profitable margins on the product. The rest of the approaches or the rest of the aspect of the product design is not important. So it is very important that when you want to sell the product, you have to enhance the competitiveness of the product. At the same time, you have to improve the value proposition of the product. You have to strengthen the operational resilience. Most of the time, the manufacturer bring the product into the market, the product is getting sold for 2-3 years, but after 2-3 years there is no market of the product. So whenever you are doing zero based costing, it is very important that your product has to be sustainable. There has to be an sustainability in the product so that it can withstand the market margins, it can withstand the company margins in the product. So optimizing the manufacturing operations is very important. So to achieve all these objectives, it is very important that you should have a zero based vision with you. Without a zero based vision, you cannot able to finally sell the product into the market. So this vision is helping the small sector companies in India to achieve more profitability by implementing zero based costing vision. I will never say that this is a zero based costing training. I will always say that this is a zero based costing vision, because this vision is helping the manufacturer to reduce the cost of the product and to sell the more quantities of the product into the market. So in short, zero based budgeting, which is also called as a ZBB, or it is also called as a zero based costing. So when I'm dealing with zero based budgeting, it means that I'm working on the product. Whenever I'm saying zero based costing, it means I'm working on the component. So in short, the zero based budgeting, it is a budgeting approach that involves developing a new budget from scratch every time for the component. Now, first of all, let us understand what is the difference between the traditional process and what is the difference between this zero-based budgeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. You are.
Okay.
You are
Okay.
audible.
Okay. There is some problem with the. Okay, I'm sorry. There is some challenge with the range. So now let us understand. Okay. Now, first of all, let us understand what is the difference between zero-based costing and what is the difference between traditional budgeting, which is there in the organization. Traditionally, organizations or manufacturing companies are biased towards the last or historical cost of the component. Okay. So in whenever you are dealing with any manufacturing organizations, okay, so till date people are using traditional methods. Now, what is meant by traditional methods? So, say for example, if I want to do the costing of shaft, okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to consider all the expenses of the shaft from last year. So last year, what was the labor rate? Or last year, what was the machining rate? Last year, what was the raw material rate? Last year, what was the handling rates of the material? So every time when I'm doing the costing of the component, I'm taking the history of the product or I'm taking the readings of the last year. So what happens is that in this traditional budgeting, okay, so in this traditional budgeting, the calculations of the component costing, okay, they are without the manufacturing operations like feed rate, speed tool, tool cost, or the different trends in manufacturing. And whenever I'm doing traditional budgeting, I'm not considering the machining innovations in the current scenario. So this traditional process has a lot of flaws that it does not take into the machining price change and the recent market trends. Every time it is not analyzed properly in traditional methods. Okay, so whenever I am doing traditional costing or whenever I am doing traditional budgeting, every time I am not considering the size of the product, every time I am not considering the quantity of the product, only considering the machining time is not zero based costing. Today in every organization, whatever the costing of the component or whatever the costing of the product is done, it is done only based on machining time. That is not the foolproof budgeting. So without current knowledge and with the market trend, organizations are not able to negotiate with their suppliers in analytical way. Now let us take an example of the component. So as on the screen, you can see that this is the component that was developed by our customer in 2019. The cost of this component was around 950 rupees per part. We implemented ZBB and the cost of this component has been reduced by 23%. So today the cost of this component is around 730 rupees. So how we implemented ZBC and what were the outcomes of that? So when we reduced the cost from 950 to 730, we made a lot of changes in manufacturing. So we made the changes in the type of the tool. So whatever the slab milling was used or whatever the milling operation was used on this component, so we made the changes in tool type. Then we made the changes in tool material. then we made the changes in tool geometry, then we made the changes in manufacturing sequence of the component, then we made the changes in tool path. As it is a milling operation, so there is a tool path generation, so we also optimized the tool path. Then during machining there was a lot of tolerance accumulation, so we reduce the tolerance accumulation also. So whenever there is a machining, there is a coolant, so we have also worked on the coolant part. Then we have reduced the spindle speed, we have reduced the feed rates. So in at a glance, if I want to tell you, we have worked on every aspect of this component. And whenever we have implemented ZBB, we have incorporated all the fundamentals of mechanical engineering. So ZBB, it is not a cost accounting. ZBB, it is one of the hardest part where the mechanical engineering will come into the picture. So implementation of mechanical fundamentals and the cost model both will give you the ZBB in future. Now let us understand how to implement ZBB workflow. Now, in manufacturing companies, ZBB is implemented from top level strategic goals. So whenever I am saying that you want to implement ZBB, so ZBB decision, it is taken by the management. So the management will decide what should be the price of the component. The management will decide what should be the budget of the product, and then these budgets, then these costs will get navigated into the respective departments. So ZBB is implemented from top level strategic goals to be implemented into the different departments of the product. Okay, if you consider ZBB, okay, so ZBB, it is a detail oriented nature. So whenever we are working in ZBB, we have to go in depth to the expenses of the product. As I said that in this, as on the screen, you can see that this is a component. So when we wanted to reduce the cost of this product, we went into the depth of every activities of this product. So say for example, when this component went for inspection, then we also shortlisted which are the expenses that are incurred in the inspection, like whether if there is a CMM machine has to be used for inspecting this component, or whether we should use the functional gauges. Then if say for example, if this component is getting machined on the shop floor, so we decided to find out the cost drivers of this component. So it is a detail oriented nature. So zero based budgeting, it is a rolling process which is done for several phases. So with the new functional areas, it has to be reviewed by the design engineer. So zero based budgeting can really help you to lower the cost by avoiding the purchasing time. Now let us first of all understand how to implement, or how the ZBB is implemented in the organization. So the first step of implementing ZBC, that is zero based costing, is that first of all you have to understand which are the cost drivers of the product, which are the cost drivers of the component. Now these cost drivers, they can be engineering cost drivers, or they can be non-engineering cost drivers. So what is a non-engineering cost drivers is like, that is a handling time, that is a labor time. And what is the engineering cost? That is what are the manufacturing processes that is going to take place on this component. So whenever you have to implement ZBB, it is very important for every mechanical engineer that they have to find out what are the cost drivers of the product. So more technical cost drivers are machining hours, the number of engineering change orders in the manufacturing drawing, the machining setups that is required for the production, or the number of inspection, or the direct labor which is working on this component. So there are n number of activities which are involved in this product. So whenever these activities are involved, I have to shortlist which are the cost drivers that are affecting the product price. Once those cost drivers are identified by the mechanical engineer, then second important step in ZBB workflow, in ZBB implementation, is the activity based costing. Now let us understand what is meant by activity based costing. So as on the screen, you can see that there is a term that is called as ABC, that is activity based costing, which is one of the integral implementation of ZBC. So activity based costing, it is nothing but it is a technique in finding out how many activities are involved in the product, right from concept to reality. Say for example, if you are developing a component which is called as a component development engineering. So whenever you are working in component development engineering department, you have to find out how many activities are involved from concept to reality. Say for example, 40 activities are involved in developing the component from concept to reality, then you have to assign the expenses for every activity. Like say for example, I have to purchase the raw material. Then second activity is that I have to bring the raw material to the factory. Third is to lower down the material, I have to use labor. Then there will be machining, then there will be supervision, then there will be testing. So these are the different activities that are involved in the product. Once the activity has been shortlisted, then you have to assign the expenses for every activity. Once you have assigned the expenses for every activity, then you will come to know what is the final product price. And once you come to know what is the final product price, then you will start doing the optimization of the expenses for every activity. Now in most of the organization, people don't work based on activity based costing. They will simply find out how much machining time is there on the component. So based on machining time, based on labor charge, based on machining time per hour rates, they will find out the cost of the product, which is altogether wrong. So for example, as on the screen, you can see this is a product A and then there is a product B. So there might be a possibility that in product A we have 10 10 activities. In product B we have only 2 activities. So once you find out the activities in the product, then you have the foolproof costing part on this. So it is very important that you have to find out the activity based costing. Let us find out the next part is the expectations. So it is very important that whenever you are doing zero based costing, whenever you are doing zero based budgeting, it is very important that first of all you should know what is the expectation of the management from your for the product. Like there might be an expectation that we want the component to look exotic. So if you want to look the component exotic, then definitely you will procure some exotic material like MS or SS. So if you want the product quality to be on higher side, which is one of the expectation of the management, then definitely you will procure some high quality material, grades material. Then it is very important to know what is the part size. Like if say the management is saying that I want the part size to be in the dimension of so and so, so that will give the weight of the product. So the management will decide what has to be the weight of the product, what should be the weight of the component. Now based on the weight of the product, based on the weight of the component, you have to start working on the designing part of the product, because you want to fit the dimensions of the product that will give you the weight of that. Next, the third expectations from the management is always about the manufacturing processes. As I've said that many times, we have seen at our customer place that unnecessary manufacturing processes are involved. So wherever there is an assembly interface on the component, you should machine those components with a close tolerance. Wherever there is no assembly interface, then you should machine the component with the coarse tolerance. This is the fundamentals of any machining component. But many times we have seen that the entire component is machined with very close tolerance. So whenever you are machining the component with very close tolerance, it will hit the price of the product, it will shoot the price of the product. So it is very important that whenever you are going to machine the component, so you have to decide whether it has to be machined by some classical machines like VMC or CNC, or whether you can able to machine the component on conventional processes like lathe or some other 2D machining processes. So it is very important that you should first of all know what is the expectations from the management and what are the budgets that are given by the management, and then you have to fit the product into that budget. Okay, the next is the blanket cost of the supplier, which is one of the main important thing in zero-based costing. Now, what is meant by blanket cost of the supplier? Let us understand this. So as we know that due to COVID-19, there has been an rising material price and inflation in the cost price at every level for the procurement of the material. Many master suppliers are reporting that there is a price increase in 7% on steel products and 10% on stainless steel products. So one of the most powerful way to mitigate the risk of rising prices is that you have to make the supply chain very proactive. So if the supply chain is proactive, then the blanket purchase order will come into the picture. Now, what is blanket purchase order? So blanket purchase order, it is also called as a standing purchase order in many organizations. So in this blanket purchase order, a long-term contract between the organizations and between the supplier is made so that they can supply the product or services at fixed price regularly for certain amount of time. So a blanket purchase order, it is in short, it is a contract to buy the component at guaranteed price within the specific period or specific schedule, I can say. Like say for example, if I am a manufacturer of shaft and if I am manufacturing 12,000 spindles in a year. So first of all, it is very important for me to understand that what is the size of the manufacturing, whether I am into a batch manufacturing, whether I am into high volume manufacturing, whether I am into low volume manufacturing. So say for example, I am a manufacturer of spindle and every year I am manufacturer around 12,000 spindles. So there are certain operations on the shaft and I need a supplier who can provide me certain operations on the shaft. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call a supplier and then I'm going to release one blanket purchase order. So in that blanket purchase order, I will mention that you will be machining 1000 shaft every month and you will be providing me the 12,000 components every year. So once the blanket purchase order is released, then the labor rates, machining rates and all the rates, all the expenses are locked on that date. So if there is an inflammation in the charges, if there is an inflammation in the labor, if there is an inflammation in material procurement, it won't affect the cost of the product. So this blanket purchase order, it is getting implemented in almost all organizations and it is helping the supply chain to a very good platform. So what are the basically advantages of blanket purchase order in ZBC is that it is making the framework very easy, because once I release the blanket purchase order for a vendor or for the supplier, there is no need that I have to run behind him. Okay, once for all, I release the blanket purchase order for 1 year. So the framework or the purchasing power increases. It also increases the efficiency and it also increases the purchasing lead time. So ZBC, it is one of the powerful tool. You cannot underestimate costings of the product. So whenever the engineers are working in any manufacturing company, design company, okay, so the most important part is that they have to equally work on the cost part. Like say for example, I am designing a very beautiful product in SolidWorks, I am designing very beautiful product in CATIA, I am designing very beautiful products in Creo. But if the cost of the component is very high, then the whatever the designs I have made, it is useless. So I have to design the product so that it can sustain in the market, it can give the margins to the organizations and it can work under the loading conditions. So this is one of the hardest part of mechanical engineers. To share with you about the horizons of ZBB, those engineers who are aware of ZBC, those engineers who are aware of ZBB, their starting salary is around 10 lakh rupees. Recently, there has been a job opening from Foratia, which is there in Henzewadi. So you can see there is a cost team leader requirement, and the starting salary is around 15 lakh rupees. So this is one of the most important areas where today engineers are getting highly paid jobs in domain area. So the for next 7 days today today I don't wanted to start immediately with the costing part, because I wanted you all to know what is ZBC. From tomorrow onwards I will be starting with the sheet metal commodity. So first of all, we will be working on every commodity. So tomorrow I'll be teaching you how to do or how to create the cost models of sheet metal components. Tomorrow I'll be teaching you how to create the cost model of fabrication items. Tomorrow onwards I'll be helping you how to create the cost model of die components. So there is no any theory. There is a lot of numericals which are involved into ZBC, and then you have to develop the cost models based on your engineering IQ. So that was ZBC from my side. Tomorrow, the prerequisites of the training is that you should have A4 size drawing books with you. If there is no A4 size drawing book with you, at least you should have a notebook with you, so that tomorrow you can able to draw the drawings of the component and you can do the calculations of the product on your notebook. So this was from my side. This is where I wanted to give you a glimpse about ZBC, because the term of ZBC, it is very new into education, but this is one of the running part in the organization. So if anyone has any questions, they can please ask me.